A recent conversation with a friend prompted me to ask myself the question, what are the safeguards and measures that are in place here in Paraguay to protect the rights of permanent and temporary residents and citizens? It's a question that you would think that you would ask yourself when you move to a country and settle there for a prolonged period of time. But in reality, it's something that we often just assume, and we go along on the basis that we just think that there must be something in place and everything will turn out okay. But it's probably not the best course of action. I think you really should take the time to identify if there are any measures or other things in place that are designed to protect you and your rights, or at least know what your rights are if you do have any. So with that in mind, I pulled up the Constitution of Paraguay with the intention of learning more about what the go is here and what rights are in place. And what I found in that document absolutely shocked and surprised me. But before going into that, I think it's useful just to think a little bit about some of the recent history of Paraguay, because that gives an insight into what might have been in the minds of the people that drafted their constitution. In the past couple of 100 years, Paraguay has been through a lot. It's been through a disastrous war that wiped out most of its male population. It's been through its share of political turmoil and dictatorship. And what I have realised when reading the Constitution is that you can actually see those experiences expressed in the spirit of the document. And I think the Constitution is written in such a way that those who wrote it had a clear intention to protect its citizens in the event that issues of the past may arise. The Constitution of Paraguay consists of 291 articles, and a great many of them focus specifically on the rights of the individual. So I'd just like to share some of the highlights that I marked off in the Constitution of Paraguay that I found interesting. God, human dignity, assurance of liberty, equality, justice and pluralistic democracy. The document then goes on to talk about the forbidding of dictatorship, protects and guarantees life from conception, provides comprehensive principles to protect the individual regarding detention and arrest, protects the free expression of the press and social media, protection of the right to access true information, recognises the family as the foundation of society and it includes the stable union of a man and woman, protects the family home so it cannot be seized, disallows monopolies, protection of private property, gives permission to citizens to have the right to protect the Constitution by any means necessary, renounces war except in the course of self-defence, prevents central government scooping up municipal revenue, restricts confiscation of assets by the state, stipulates specific strict rules that control how the Constitution can be changed, restricts the power of the government to suspend the Constitution, guarantees the Constitution can only be changed in 10-yearly increments. I think you'd agree that that's a pretty comprehensive set of protections, and they're just some of the many that are in place. In terms of constitutions, I doubt there are many others around that provide so many articles that are specifically designed to protect the citizens of the country. And when I look at the Constitution of Paraguay and compare it to the Constitution of the US, for example, I see some similarities. In particular, there are three commonalities between the two that I think provide the basis and reason why both constitutions have provided a very stable basis for those countries to move forward. Firstly, a constitution should be comprehensible. Any reasonably competent person should be able to pick it up, read it, and understand it as it applies to them. And in the case of the Paraguay Constitution, that's most certainly the case. The second thing that I think is a really important element of a successful constitution is that it should be designed to protect the rights of the people. That should be a given. It should be a no-brainer. But when you look at a lot of other constitutions, it's not the case. Thankfully, in the case of Paraguay, it is the case. The document is overwhelmingly focused towards the individual and the protections of the individual. The third thing that I think is really important for any decent constitution is that it shouldn't be able to be easily changed. The government shouldn't be able to just reach in at a moment's notice and change whatever it likes on a whim. And thankfully, the Constitution of Paraguay provides for that protection. It's not easily changed, and there's even a stipulation in the Constitution that when the process is triggered, in order to try and change it, that it has to be done in plain sight. So these are three critically important things that I recognise are common between the Constitution of Paraguay and, funnily enough, the US Constitution. And why am I talking about the US Constitution? Despite what's happening in America at the moment and how you feel about the country, I think it's beyond dispute that America would be a very different place if it were not for the Constitution, and in particular the Bill of Rights. You can ask people anywhere around the world if they know anything about the Bill of Rights in America, and they're more likely to know more about that than what they know about the Constitution of their own country. So that goes to show how comprehensible it is and how widely disseminated it is. It's an incredibly robust document, and it, even to this day, despite all the dramas, has provided a dam wall to stop some craziness that may have been unravelled in that country that hasn't been allowed to do so, thanks to the Constitution that was written in that country. Is the Constitution of Paraguay perfect? No document is. If I had any influence, I'd like to see some protections in there for things like the protection of banking for all citizens and the right to access the financial institutions in a way that allows people to open bank accounts and move funds in order to live a life here, but that's a subject for another video. But I think it's interesting to consider that the Constitution of Paraguay was reformed in 1992. So it's a modern constitution, and it's interesting that it incorporates things like the protection of social media, for example. So the country's at a real advantage because it's working on a map that's only recently been upgraded. So I think it's a really positive thing for the country. I think that it's interesting to look at the Constitution of Paraguay and to look at, for example, the country that I previously resided in. That country does have a constitution, not that I had ever looked at it, and I don't think most people that live there even look at it, because once you do look at it, you realise that there's really not much in it for you. The Constitution of the place where I previously resided is essentially just an act that brings together a whole lot of other acts of Parliament. And an act of Parliament can be changed on a whim. A government can change an act without any consultation of the people and can do so in a day or two. And when you look at the preamble of the Constitution, the country I previously resided in, it gives you quite a bit of insight into the spirit of the document. But I think it would be more accurate for that preamble to say this, that in that particular country, your rights are what the government decides they are. We don't require your input or permission to change any part of it. You can complain, but we don't have to listen to you. You can change an act of Parliament within a day or so, and this constitution is simply a conglomeration of legislation. So don't bother trying to keep up. And just for theatre, they might finish it off with a smiling emoji. But when I look at the Constitution, the place I previously resided, I thank goodness that I'm here, and I really am appreciative of the people that sat down in 1992 and took the time to write a meaningful document. Am I saying that a well-drafted constitution is the solution to all problems? Of course not. A constitution is only useful if the people believe in it, are aware of it and stand by it. The good news is that Paraguay is a young country. The median age is 27. The economy is buoyant and it's growing year by year. Putting that together with the fact that they've got a really solid constitution, it all bodes well for the future. But the important thing I'd like to get across is that the Paraguay Constitution is an extraordinary document. So I know speaking about things like constitution and human rights is very pre-2000s, but the fact that we don't talk about it much these days is probably an insight as to why the world has got into the state it is today. That's the way things roll. Take care. Ciao.